5 months ago from the publication of this video, I made it a personal mission to outline the road to victory for every winner on Survivor Winners at War. 20 players, 21 games, and 4 videos. And on the heels of that series, without a doubt, the most requested video idea I received from you guys was a request to cover the remaining winners who were not on Winners at War. And so, as the war raged, I waited. And waited. And now, ladies and gentlemen, internet, my name is Peridiam, and let's finish what we started. Prepare yourselves, this will be a 4-part video series discussing every Survivor winner who was not on Season 40 and their path to victory on the season they won. The intent is to provide a nice synopsis of what they did, major events, their overall journey from start to finish, and by the end of it all 40 winning games will be covered. And if you want to check my previous series covering the winners who were on Winners at War, check the links in the description down below. Without much else to say, let's jump right into it with the first winner in Survivor history from all the way back in the year 2000 on the beaches of Malaysia, Pulau Tiga, with Richard Hatch in Survivor Season 1, Borneo.
This is more than just a test of survival skills. It's also a test of social skills. Here, it's the impressions you make on the other castaways that determines your fate. To win, you must survive the island, survive the vote, and ultimately, survive each other.
Richard Hatch entered the season as one of the only players who recognized this show was a game first and foremost. While everyone else was trying to figure out what the experience meant to them, Richard was mostly sizing up his competition, understanding they were in his way toward winning $1 million. Not to say that the entire cast was just rolling over, far from it, but Rich employed a rough draft of the Machiavellian style gameplay you would later see in almost every season. He was upfront to a select few people for strategic purposes, jumping on board the first successful alliance in Survivor history, the Tagi 4. This alliance is easily the most famous, comprised of Rich, Kelly, Rudy, and Sue. While in the first few votes they weren't on the same page, voting in different directions, ultimately, they came together to form a powerful voting bloc that controlled the game from very early on all the way until the final 4. Rich wasn't just a game player though, he was also a big provider for the tribe, catching fish on a daily basis, winning his tribe mates over by feeding them, and in some ways imbuing what the show was perceived to be about: survival. Through his hard work ethic around camp, as well as being well educated and well spoken, Rich won the respect of his peers, even if he sometimes came across as cocky or overly confident. At some point even, he got entirely naked and just hung out around camp because it felt good. In the middle of the season, he literally wore his birthday suit on his birthday. There is a lot that can be said about the behind-the-scenes happenings on this season, probably more than any season in Survivor history, especially in the pre-merge, especially at the Tagi Beach. But ultimately, the Tagi 4 Alliance take control alongside their buddy Dr. Sean, who was a bit aloof with his strategy, and onward they marched into the merge with equal numbers, but not so much equal in their approach. The merge vote of Survivor Borneo may be the biggest shit show we will ever see in a vote result. Of the 9 people who were eligible to receive votes, 7 of them did. But the biggest takeaway here was that the Tagi 4, Rich included, voted together, and literally nobody else did. Because the opposition, the Pagong tribe, were all over the map. Most of them didn't want to create an alliance. They believed an alliance was counter to the spirit of the show. It was kind of like cheating. It was making it unfun. Why can't people just vote for whoever they want without having to be so affected by anyone else? It was the most innocent take you will ever get in Survivor, and while I appreciated the sentiment, even more so did Richard Hatch.
It sounds like sheer stupidity to me when somebody says, oh no, I'm not going to build an alliance, and I hope they wouldn't do that either. I giggle and think, okay.
What followed from here was a routing of the Pagong Alliance, also known eventually as a Pagonging. From the final 10 to the final 5, every Pagong tribe member was voted out. Now, it wasn't always easy. At one point, Kelly abandoned the Tagi 4 Alliance because she was getting sick of them. But Rich always could rely on Dr. Sean to vote their way because he was voting based on the alphabet, which conveniently meant he was also always voting for a Pagong tribe member. While this was intentional from Sean, Rich basically allocated the Alliance's votes alongside Sean's stray vote, knowing it was a reliable outlier, basically replacing Kelly's spot in the Alliance even if she wasn't voting their way. Sean was never in this alliance, but he was taken advantage of by them. At the final 6, Rich intended to take out Kelly for being a rat, for butting up to the opposition and turning on the Toggies. She was outnumbered, but then she went on an immunity streak, winning 4 straight immunity challenges from the final 6 to the final 3. Really clutch. Rich, however, had ingratiated himself so well within his alliance that he was safe under most circumstances. At the final 4, he and Rudy voted out Sue, and eventually Kelly had to flip to do the same to break the tie. Because Rich and Rudy were a near inseparable duo, Rich relied on Rudy as a guaranteed ally all season, a vote in his corner at all times. But Rich also knew he likely wouldn't beat Rudy in the final 2. He was a really likable guy, so in the final immunity challenge, Rich threw it. He willingly stepped down, knowing this was the smartest move for him. Both Kelly and Rudy were going to take him to the end, and he couldn't cut Rudy. It would look terrible to the jury. So instead, he increased his odds of winning by decreasing Rudy's chances of being in the final 2 alongside him. Kelly won and took Rich to the final 2 as he expected, and ultimately, Rich won the game by a close vote, a photo finish, a 4-3, where the biggest snake of the season ate the most formidable rat. Or so says Sue.
The winner of the first Survivor competition is Rich.
So now we move on to the second winner from Survivor the Australian Outback. Following on the heels of Richard Hatch, we have Tina Wesson. Tina may just be the most unique winner in 40 seasons, unable to be replicated, as I've seen some fans claim she is one of the most calculated Puppet Master winners, while others would just happen to rank her pretty low. So, where's the truth? Perhaps the most important factor going into season 2 with Tina was that she wasn't interested in being perceived as a villain like Richard Hatch from the previous season, in front of 35 million people each episode each week. Tina preferred to be the hero. I think most people would, but she saw how being strategic from the first season kind of painted Rich in a negative light, in a taboo light. Again, this is a very unique circumstance for a Survivor winner that you just won't see again. First things first, Tina was intentionally hid in the premiere episode as a stark contrast to Rich, who declared himself the winner in the premiere episode of Borneo. But Tina entered her 8-person tribe in a majority alliance of 5, which makes sense. Herself, Colby, Amber, Jerry, and Mitchell. So this alliance first picks off Kel and Mad Dog, 2 outsiders. And from here, this is where Tina comes alive. With 6 people, Tina realizes that she's on the bottom of this alliance. Sure, the 6th man, Keith, he's going next, but after that, she has no power, no ability to control the flow of the eliminations. So episode 4 is a massive turning point. Tina rallies Keith to her side and then tries to flip Mitchell, but he's in a good spot and he doesn't want to go against the grain. On the way to Tribal Council, off camera, Tina manages to convince Colby to join her and Keith to vote out Mitchell, because he was providing the least for the camp and was the least malleable, and he also had a vote cast against him from the previous tribal, which meant that in a tie vote, 3 for him and say 3 for Keith, Mitchell would go, as the tiebreaker was based around past votes. None of this strategy was caught on camera, but we do see glimpses of it when Tina goes to vote. And just like that, Tina is now in the driver's seat. This was a huge move for early Survivor. The first time power was usurped from the player at the bottom. Unprecedented and impressive. Likewise, Tina manages to casually get some really important information out of Kimmy, a player on the opposing tribe, while they're idling at a challenge. Tina learns that Deb, the first boot of this season, voted for Jeff Varner, meaning he had a vote against him and could lose a tiebreaker if Tina got lucky. And at the merge, 5 versus 5, they got more than lucky. Tina ensured that Keith, the tribe mate with the most votes in her alliance, won immunity. She and Colby also made sure that the other tribe would vote for him, as he had no prior votes cast against him. Colby acted a bit aggro and drew their attention away from Jerry, who had 2 votes prior cast against her. I'm going through all the little numbers here in the details because all of this is important to note. It dictated the rest of the season. This one vote was so crucial. It enabled Tina to be the winner. She was able to decide the boot order, creating a layered, perhaps onion-like alliance with herself and Colby at the core, then Keith, and then Amber and Jerry on the outs. She also bonded strongly with Roger and Elizabeth, which allowed her options to pick off her own alliance at the final 8 and the final 6 and not have to worry about any blowback. Everyone revolved around her and her sweet, respectable nature. It could be argued that Tina, despite not winning an immunity all season, had her final 2 seat locked up as early as the final 9, to where she had even convinced Colby to take her to the final 2 and lose to her despite him having the very easy win against Keith. Tina definitely attempted to play the hero in spite of being very tactical and deliberate, almost manipulative in her calculations. She desired to reward the good guys of the season, such as taking Roger and Elizabeth a little bit farther, but ultimately she was there for her and her alone.
I think Tina is more deserving because she has really played this game. It wasn't winning 7 or 8 challenges that got her here. It was strategy and using her head. She's a smart woman, and I think she deserves it.
From being at the bottom very early to comfortably sitting at the top by the end, Tina beat Colby in a close 4-3 vote to become the second winner and the first woman to win the game.
The winner of Survivor, the Australian Outback.
From here, we are skipping season 3 as I covered that winner in my previous series, so if you want to talk about that game, head over to that video. Next up is season 4, Survivor Marquesas, with the prayer warrior, Vecepia Towery. One of the most overlooked winners through 40 seasons, though if you asked me to put money on any one winner to seize the day in an all-star season, it would most likely be her. Vecepia's game is very understated. She played rather quiet and wasn't shown very much in comparison to other big names on her cast, but Marquesas is one of the most important seasons in Survivor history, and she won it, so let's get right to it. First off, gotta be said, V began on one of the least successful, least winning tribes in all of Survivor, Maramu. She bonded quickly with her tribe mate Sean as they mused over the fact that they were somewhat on their own and they were both the only 2 minorities in the entire cast. At the first tribal council, Peter was voted out, and while we didn't see a ton of strategy or a ton of reasons why, it's probably because of how eccentric he came off. Vecepia targeted Sarah, a high-maintenance woman who didn't bring much to the tribe, but V did not get her way. That said, Vecepia's game really takes a turn after this first vote. She demonstrates her adaptability by joining a 4-person alliance in a tribe of 7 alongside Sean, Boston Rob, or just Rob at the time, and Sarah, the woman she had just targeted. Together, these 4 controlled the tribe, especially Boston Rob, who was trying his best to be this young godfather archetype. Both Patricia and then Hunter were taken out in subsequent episodes, with V voting for both of them, and the Hunter boot being very significant in the evolution of the game, as it was the first time a major threat and camp provider was voted off so early, just episode 3. Hunter was the big man on campus, and just like that, he was gone not but 9 days into the season. An unbalanced tribe swap happens at the final 15, and V is now flat out on the bottom, alongside her allies Sean and Rob. But unlike Sean and Rob, V attempts to ingratiate herself with the opposing tribe mates, ensuring she wouldn't be targeted first if one of them was taken out. In fact, on the flip side of all this, the opposing Rotu tribe took out one of their own in a 7-1 vote against Gabe, partially because Gabe appeared to be the least reliable member. He was kind of playing like they were still in Borneo. But Gabe, this is season 4. This is New School Survivor. V makes the merge, but her only allies are still just Rob and Sean in a tribe of 10. Never has a winner had worse odds through 4 seasons. And of course, go figure, Rob gets targeted and voted out right away for being a loudmouth. Both him and Sean butt heads with John, the leader of the opposing tribe. So now V is down 2-7 through no fault of her own, facing what should be impossible odds. And then things get really interesting. Dare I say, one of the most interesting things through 40 seasons. The final 9 immunity challenge reveals the pecking order of the 7 Rotu members. Clearly, V and Sean are at the bottom. They're not from Rotu, but what about the other 7? We see Kathy, Pascal, and Nalia are all in the minority of the Rotus, so once they get to 7, there's already a final 4 in place. both V and Sean fight to flip the bottom of the Rotus, and what do you know, in a complete shift of power, overthrowing the big man on campus, John is voted out at the final 9. And outside of a power lines forming in Borneo, this move here is probably the biggest in Survivor history. Unprecedented to have people who didn't know each other come together and have 3 flip on 4 alongside the 2 at the very bottom. I know this sounds basic from the lens of a modern Survivor fan, but it wasn't back then. It was game-changing in every sense of the term, and V was in the thick of it.
You know how people always say everything is not perfect? When you get back from a challenge, you find out just how everything is not always perfect. At the challenge, there was quite a bit of cockiness with Tammy, Zoe, Big Rob, and John.
Nalia and Pascal, I think, are really supporting my success in this game and are really rooting for me. And knowing that you can rely upon those 2 people, I mean, it's like 2 free passes.
From here, we get a pagonging of sorts where the opposing alliance is taken out one by one. They lopped off the head of the snake, and the rest followed, leaving V at the final 5 with her fellow merry band of misfits. However, Kathy, the swing vote between 2 pairs, decided to go with her older trimates in Nalia and Pascal, taking out Sean, leaving V yet again on the bottom. But this was probably a mistake, as V had prepared one of the most ingenious moves in Survivor history, one that even I regrettably forgot to include in my most ingenious moves series from a year ago. Dadoy. My biggest omission in any video to date. V knew that there would be a challenge down the line involving knowing your tribe mates and their personal lives. She kept a journal as a personal item because every player gets a personal item, and all season she took notes in it about details pertaining to the rest of the cast, just for this one moment.
I'm not gonna sit there and try to compare notes with those guys. This immunity is too important for me. I know where Patricia's from, but that's why I said I think it starts with an L. I know exactly where she's from. One of the goals that I had while I was here was to develop a relationship with everyone and know as much as I can about them. I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna play the best immunity game that I can. If I don't win it, I know I'm out of here. And so be it.
Armed with a ton of knowledge, she downplayed how much she knew and went into the final 4 challenge, easily crushing it, securing herself safe passage to the final 3. She knew this was coming and totally gamed the system to her advantage. Likewise, she then threw the final challenge after making a deal with Nalia to take out Kathy, knowing Kathy was the biggest threat remaining. Again, this so rarely happens in Survivor, let alone this early in the show, to see a challenge thrown this late in the game, but it was excellent foresight. Even though it may have lost her Kathy's vote, it didn't really matter. This was still great gameplay. V still won against a weaker opponent, another 4-3 close vote, playing one of the most underrated and overlooked games we have ever seen. She didn't need to control the game at any point, just getting good enough to never be the next target until it was too late for the rest of them.
The winner of Survivor Marquesas.
Season 5, Survivor Thailand, and oh boy, here we go. Brian Heidick is also one of the most unique winners in my opinion, if only because he has got to be one of the least emotional people we have ever seen play the game. I mean, this guy was cutthroat, everything about him was matter of fact, straightforward, but also on point, strategically at least. He was a used car salesman and, yeah, I see it. Transactional, that is the word for Brian. Despite being unemotional, he was fairly likable, got in good with just about everyone, yet also just states it plainly. This is a business trip. I'm here to make money. Let's put on our ice skates and skate to the end. Brian was Mr. Freeze, rarely showing any qualms with the decisions he had to make, the people he had to cut. He played about as robotic as you can get, and I don't say that in a negative light. Just, well, about as matter-of-factly as Brian might. He joined the majority for the first 2 votes of his tribe, proving to be a good provider, winning over his tribe mates. He had secured a comfortable spot with fellow tribe mates Helen, Ted, and Clay. And after the first vote, this foursome controlled the game, picking off Tanya and then Gandia, 2 of the 3 outsiders. Now, a major fiasco arose before the Gandia vote-off, where Ted and Gandia had an incident involving some nighttime grinding that at first came across as a small issue being resolved by the 2 people involved, But then Brian probed Ted about what happened, and Ted undersold the events to Brian, upon which Brian disseminated these remarks from Ted to Helen, and suddenly it got back to Gandia, and yeah, Brian kinda blew this moment up unintentionally. Or maybe intentionally, I'm not 100% sure. It's one of those defining moments of the season, which is why I bring it up, and it's important to note that Brian is very much at the center of why it blew up so much, although clearly so was Ted. Really, it's just not a great moment altogether, and it leads to Gandia being taken out soon after, which will end up paying dividends down the line for Brian, as they could have easily cut Jan here instead of Gandia. From here, Brian makes the merge, the fake merge. The two tribes shared one beach, but they're not yet one tribe, even though they all believe they are. Both tribes came together 5 versus 5, but because it was still a tribal game and Brian's tribe won the next 2 immunity challenges, his tribe now had the numbers 5-3 at the final 8. And yeah, easy pickings from here on out. Brian leads his tribe to take out the remaining 3 players from the other tribe once they do merge at the final 8, leading him to the final 5. Really, sounds like a bit of a cakewalk, but along the way, to get there, Brian lays the foundation for what allows him to be so well positioned in the endgame. First, Brian had a strong Day 1 alliance with Ted. The two of them worked in near lockstep all season. Second, by the merge, Brian formed another strong bond with Clay. Both Ted and Clay viewed Brian as their #1 ally. Third, Brian formed a strong relationship with Helen, whom he was also viewed as her #1 ally. By the family visit episode, Helen even told her husband she couldn't turn on Brian, despite the fact that her husband was like, "You should probably turn on Brian."
See, Brian will play fair and with integrity. Clay won't. Clay's out for Clay. He's a selfish son of a gun, and he'll cut everybody's throat here if he thinks it'll get him the million.
She said she couldn't turn on him because he was a great guy and he didn't deserve that. They had too tight of a bond for her to go with anyone else. Brian had a working relationship with Jan, but Jan was at the bottom of the 5 and thus was somewhat on the out strategically. She was kind of dragged along, but still, Brian had sway over her as well as whereas the rest of them, they just kind of didn't. Lastly, Brian bonded with Jake, the final remaining member of the opposing tribe. The two of them went fishing, clamming, just spent time on the water, chatting away. Brian's social game was surprisingly strong for someone with little emotion to speak of. So once the endgame approaches, he has every option available, to the point where he just straight blindsides everyone because none of them think that he's gonna turn on them. He lies to Ted as he votes out Ted, then lies to Helen at the final 4 as she goes. He wins several immunities, preventing him from being voted out, but likewise, I don't think he goes anyway. He had too many allies willing to take him to the final 3 at least. Brian ultimately chose to go with Clay and Jan to the final 3, which was a perfect combination for him. Clay was not well respected by the jury and would be an easier beat than the rest. Well, Jan was physically the weakest and thus likely doesn't beat him in immunity. And yeah, guess what? Both happened. Brian won the final 3 immunity, voted out Jan, and took Clay to the final 2. And while the final vote was close, another 4-3, it's important to note that Clay was never ever getting those 4 votes that went to Brian. Jake was just way closer to Brian than Clay. Ted despised Clay, even wondered if he was racist. Jan enjoyed Brian a lot more. Clay was kind of condescending toward Jan. And Helen, well, Helen was livid at Brian for her blind side, but Clay's answer to her jury question all but guaranteed she could never vote for him. Brian may not have received the first 3 jurors' votes, but he had the rest on lock. Ultimately, Brian was an emotionless robot. His family visit tape watching was awkward. He tried to downplay his wife's behavior as well as how well off his house appeared. Did he really need the money? He also made some questionable and sexist remarks. He was the biggest villain winner then and may still hold that title after 20 years, but he's also well respected as a game player for just how smooth of an operator he was. He was Cool Hand Luke, Mr. Freeze. He managed to luck out a bit with the numbers by the merge, but he had set himself up so well by the end that he was still the cream of the crop as far as gameplay goes.
The winner of Survivor Thailand, Brian.
And then lastly, for part 1, we get to Jenna Maraska, the youngest winner through 6 seasons and the youngest female to win Survivor even to this day. Survivor the Amazon Season 6 split the tribes by gender, 8 men and 8 women. Jenna, being young and fairly attractive, was not happy with this, as she believed playing with some of the guys would go a longer way than a bunch of older women. Probably the case, given most of the guys' tribe were doing nothing but talking about her through half of this pre-merge. Jenna was a popular subject for the younger guys' tribe, who kind of behaved like a frat. But nonetheless, Jenna bonded with 2 women in Heidi and Shauna, also on the younger side of the women's tribe, as well as Dina, who was the most strategic female on the cast. Together, these 4 women controlled the game and picked off the outsiders, first with Janet and then with Joanna. Lastly, they targeted Jean. Indeed, Jenna had to be the last J name standing, and Dr. Sean's alphabet strategy finally was being followed up on 5 seasons later. No, but really, after 4 episodes, at the final 12, Jenna was whisked away to a special reward, being the youngest woman in the game. Joining the youngest man, Dave, the two spent a night together eating food and showering and gossiping. Jenna accidentally got a little too loose-lipped and revealed all of the inner workings of the women's tribe, and then the next morning, Jeff Probst arrived and had the 2 of them divvy up the new swapped tribes. Because Dave knew about all of the women's tribe dynamics, he split up Jenna and Heidi, weakening her and her #1 ally. But it turned out it wasn't the worst outcome, as Jenna was able to ingratiate herself well enough with her newly swapped tribe alongside Rob Cesternino, Matthew, and Alex. Also Dina and Shauna, 2 former allies. And Shauna basically flipped on Jenna, not sure how strategic she was here, but the moment that Shauna laid eyes on Alex, she was ready to jump ship and go with the guys. Except Jenna and Dina pivoted to work alongside Rob and Matt, meaning Shauna would go if they ever went to tribal. Which they did, and Shauna went. The tribes merged, and the women were at a 6-4 disadvantage, but because of the swap dynamics, it was less about men versus women at this point and more about the individual players. Really, it became a 7-3 dynamic with Roger, Dave, and Butch on the bottom, 3 guys whose social games were rather poor. Roger was blasted out at the merge unceremoniously, followed by Dave at the final 9. Within that majority 7 alliance at the merge, there were 5 controlling the votes, Jenna being a number in that group, alongside Heidi, Alex, Rob, and Dina. And at the final 8, Dina wanted to preemptively turn on the alliance by voting out Alex. While it wasn't a bad idea, Alex was a big threat. Jenna really didn't like this. She was really close to Alex, and both her and Heidi joined Rob and Alex to turn on Dina. This would then leave Jenna, Heidi, Alex, and Rob in the final 7 with a clear majority over the 3 on the bottom in Butch, Christy, and Matt. But then Rob Cesternino happened, as he does, and he really ping-ponged back and forth to the endgame. Rob was the sly strategist that was vastly underestimated by the rest of the cast, and the moment he saw an opening, he took it. Alex made a bad comment to Rob at the final 7 when he revealed that he, Jenna, and Heidi would turn on Rob at the final 4. Well, Rob didn't like that outcome, so he shifted gears and voted with the bottom 3 players to take out Alex, now leaving Jenna and Heidi on the outs. Really, for the first time all game, Jenna was in a really bad spot and likely should have gone home in the next 2 votes. Jenna was feeling sick and greatly missed her mother back home who had cancer and wanted to quit the game by this point. She had even asked to be voted out, but then went on to win immunity. It appeared Heidi was screwed. One of the 2 women were going, no thanks to Rob, her former ally whom she really didn't like anymore for taking out Alex. But Rob approached her at the last second before the vote before Tribal Council and offered her an olive branch, a new deal. They would all vote out Christy, one of Jenna's adversaries all game. Christy was the swing vote. She debated joining Jenna and Heidi to tie the vote 3 men to 3 women, but Rob undercut her and worked with Jenna to take out Christy, removing the middle woman. Jenna likewise gave up her immunity necklace to Heidi, the first time ever in Survivor history, to protect her and ensure that Heidi wasn't going home. Jenna rather would have left over Heidi, and if anyone was getting votes, she would have preferred it to be her. Also, important to note that Rob viewed Jenna as a goat, a player who could easily be beat in the end, especially given she wasn't feeling great physically or mentally and it kinda checked out. So as much as she despised Rob for turning on her 1 round prior, she also recognized he was an asset to her survival. But Heidi was still a big threat, and at the final 5, she was voted out, leaving Jenna as the last woman standing in a men versus women season. She was the youngest and now the sole representative for their tribe against Rob, Matt, and Butch. From here, Jenna was certainly on the bottom and likely gets voted out at 4th or 3rd had she not won immunity, but go figure, she went on to win both of the final immunities and guaranteed herself a spot in the final 2, where she ended up taking Matthew to join her, a player whose social game was really weak. He wasn't respected much by anyone. He was kind of strung along by Rob all season as an extra vote. In spite of Jenna's lack of dominance or clever moves all season, shifting and cutting people left and right, she was still well liked by most of the cast, arguably having the strongest social game of anyone.
Don't underestimate people because they're a woman or because they're small or skinny or something. Being here taught me that I can push beyond my limits, way beyond I ever could think, and that is like a valuable life lesson, especially for me being so young. Like, I feel like I can do anything right now. Anything that you throw at me, I can handle.
She had numerous votes on lock from early on, most certainly Dave, Alex, and Heidi, and given Dina was in favor of a woman winning, a far cry from Roger, the merge boot, who was intentionally left off of the jury since he was not in favor of a woman winning, you begin to realize, yet again, just how much Survivor as a game is focused on connections and less on blindsides. In fact, I think there's a good argument to be made that Jenna even beats Rob in the final vote. Jenna won 6-1 over Matt, the largest margin of any winner yet, and it was shocking to the viewing audience given Matt wasn't so dislikable in the edit, whereas Jenna, she didn't curry favor by wanting to quit, wasn't a huge game player, and didn't have a loud voice. She's still regarded as one of the weaker winners strategically, and I see why, but nonetheless, she has continued to carry that social torch, demonstrating how important being able to jive with the rest of the cast really is.
The winner of Survivor, Amazon.
And that's it for part 1 of the Road to Victory, the newer Road to Victory for every winner in Survivor. What do you guys think about these early old school winners thus far? And don't you worry, stay tuned because part 2 is just around the corner, and yeah, we still got some big names coming up. But regardless, thank you guys for making it this far, making it to the end. I'm excited to keep going. I can't wait to get to parts 2, 3, and 4. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to remember where this show all started on your way out, and I will see you in the next one. Once I just, step down from this final immunity challenge. There we go. Anyone got an orange slice?
You don't want to smell? They smell.
You know what oranges smell like?
Oranges. Oh, you don't know what these oranges smell like.
We want you to come home soon, and we want you to win the $1 million so that we can all go to Fiji. Love you.